Today, we are talking about a part of the startup founding process that is really crucial to success, which is verifying that you are building the right product for the right customer in the right market, otherwise known as product market fit. So working out if your company has product market fit is an important step for justifying spending resources and growth, and convincing investors that you're worth the risk of investment. But where do you start? How do you know if you've achieved it? And what happens if it doesn't go to plan? To help answer some of these questions, today I'm joined by Marta Krupinska, who is the CEO and co-founder at carbon removals climate tech Curate. I've got Jon Kåre Stene, who's the partner at VC firm Skyfall Ventures, and Georgie Smallwood, who is the Chief Product and Technology Officer at greeting cards company Moonpig. Thank you all for joining me today. I'm Sadia, I'm Sifted's editorial assistant, so you might have seen my name on articles on our daily newsletter, which has just gone daily if you're not signed up. And I also cover tech bio here at Sifted. So thank you for joining us. So we'll also be coming to questions from the audience throughout today's conversation. So if you've got any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box, and upvote any that you spot that you'd like to see answered. I'd ask that you kind of keep your questions general if possible, so that they are helpful to lots of people rather than super specific things. So yeah, just drop them in whenever they occur to you, and we'll be coming to those throughout the conversation. So I thought a good place to kind of start a conversation about a topic essential to the startup founding process as this would be to really get back to the basics. So I'd like to hear the panel's thoughts on what is product market fit. So what do you understand by the term? What does it actually mean for a startup? Jon, do you want to kick us off?
No, what should I say? I think it's the point where you go from a bit of uncertainty to growth, where it's maybe the joke is if you ask what product market fit is, then you haven't experienced it, because I think being a founder, I think it's a bit frustrating not having product market fit, but then suddenly there's a shift happening where sales cycles are shorter and something feels like it explodes, and it's quite hard to stand in a storm as well, but it's a part of luxury. But I think it's where you feel that we suddenly have been able to create the product and present it and sell it towards a set of customers that really likes your product, and I think it's a changing phase internally for a company to experience that. And I think from an investor perspective, it's one of these important milestones you need to reach in order to reduce risk, and like one of the basis reasons for starting a company is to be able to sell something to customers. I think it's a really important milestone where you've really been able to both communicate and provide the product that someone needs.
Great. Georgie, what are your takes on it?
I mean, do you know what? I was asked to give a talk on product market fit a couple of years ago at Slush, and I was like, my God, have we, like, come on, you just Google what product market fit is. And I think what's really interesting is that sometimes we don't know. And sometimes we think it's, if you think about that Venn diagram, right, you've got desirability, feasibility, and viability. And I think depending on the type of company, your background, the stage you're in, you index into a certain circle. But product market fit really is that sweet spot of all three, right? You can have a really desirable product and you won't have product market fit. You can have a really feasible product and you won't have product market fit. And you can have a really viable thing, but also not have product market fit. So what's interesting is, from a startup perspective, you've got your idea, right? So generally you've defined a problem to solve and you think that you know how to solve it, but it's really about the desirability of it from the payment perspective, because people, they will pay for things that have product market fit, and viability, right? So you need to be able to run that. So for instance, my last role in micromobility, like, it's a very high cost product to run. So you need to make it a viable business proposition. So I think it's really about making sure that you've got all three, and sometimes you'll start with one or maybe two if you're lucky, and you need to index into the other one.
Great. And Marta, what does it mean to you?
Thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like I smiled when Jon said, if you're asking what it is, then it means you've not experienced it. I've definitely just in the last few weeks had these moments of, what if none of the business that I'm currently working on, becomes, translates into sales? And then there's the flip side of, I think it's all about to happen all at once, and then the wheels are going to fall off the bus, and bloody hell, what am I going to do then? It's definitely a very interesting tension for a founder. In terms of definitions, my favorite one comes from Tom Hume, who runs Google Ventures, or GV in Europe, who said years ago that for him, product market fit is when your customers would be very upset to lose access from your product to your product, which in practice means that it deeply fills a need that they have, and that it wouldn't be very easy for them to just switch to something else. And I think that that's always something that sort of stayed with me, because it speaks to all of those points that Jon and Georgie just emphasized, which is, is desirable, is viable, it fulfills a need. And it means, and it means that hopefully that there is a larger number of clients or customers that would have it too, that would lead you to have a successful business.
Great. And you've all mentioned there a few of the kind of criteria that, signals a successful product market fit. But something important to note is that this definition can kind of potentially change depending on the sector you're in. So Georgie, as a consumer-facing brand, kind of what does product market fit look like for Moonpig?
So I would probably stress on what Marta just said, right? It's about, is it a product that if you took it away, and we were looking at one of our moonshot teams yesterday, and that was exactly the thing. We were checking if, we did a prototype, if we took this away, would you be disappointed, right? That was the very first question that we asked the customers. And I think that's the key, right? So from a consumer perspective, you have to think about psychology, because when you're building consumer products, it's all about psychology. So even my last three roles have been CPO in a bank, CPO in a transport company, now CPTO in a gifting platform. And the psychology is the same, right? So what are you providing to the consumer that is helping them in their day-to-day life? And from Moonpig's perspective, it's really filling a gap of connecting with people. And people want to be connected in today's day and age, but it's also interesting because life has sped up and people don't plan to do things like send that card in time or make sure that you've got that perfect gift for the person. And so what Moonpig does fundamentally, aside from all of the wonderful features that we have and the great gifting options and things like that, fundamentally it provides you the ability to digitally create something that is meaningful, send it to someone without touching anything, have it be there within 24 hours potentially, and really give them a moment that matters and to forge that connection with that other person. So that is the bit that if I said to a Moonpig customer, we're going to switch Moonpig off tomorrow, they'd be like, oh my God, but now I'm how am I going to make sure that I get those cards out or I make sure that people remember that I matter or you matter to me. So those are the things where you have product market fit. But what's interesting from a Moonpig perspective, Tia and N26, we were either creating product market fit or we were honestly trying to figure out how we got it. In the beginning, sometimes you hit a sweet spot and you just boom. And you I think we probably all go, yeah, we totally intended for that to happen, while frantically trying to figure out what it was about your product that really hit that sweet spot. Whereas at Moonpig, Moonpig has had product market fit for 20 years, right? It's an institution as far as our vertical is concerned, especially in the UK. So how do you disrupt yourself as a leading product market fit? And that's what I'm trying to do at Moonpig.
Super interesting. And Marta, as a climate company or climate founder, kind of what are the differences for you when it comes to considering product market fit?
Is such an interesting question. I think, there's Curate is my fourth company. And I've worked as an investor in between. So I've been thinking about how that works in different markets, B2B, B2C, different industries. And I think climate is very special in that, in the very definition of product market fit, you have to have a product and there has to be a market for what you're building. And climate is such a fascinating new category, because so often the question is, whose budget are you pitching when you're selling your product? And those climate budgets, in many cases, don't exactly exist right now. And this can literally be linked to the fact that, obviously we're increasingly aware of the climate catastrophe and the size of it. But when you think about sustainability teams of large corporates, largely these have been drivers of savings over time rather than a cost. And in environments in which, the UK is the first country in the world to have a legal definition of net zero, in order to claim net zero, and increasingly large businesses are going to be held to account to show their path to net zero, they're going to have to radically reduce emissions and then remove emissions. This is what Curate does. But these budgets don't currently exist. It's going to be $1 trillion market, but at the minute, it is a couple of billion. And with that come all of the challenges, because we're trying to build for the future, but we're actually pitching budgets of today. And also a new asset class, a carbon removal that's 10, 50 times more expensive than an offset, which is what people are used to. So in a way, we have the challenge of building the product and building the market at the same time, and trying to, without being too full of ourselves and relying on some data and not just opinions, understand if we're doing a good job of both or neither. And I suspect in simplest terms, the way that we've been finding it at the minute is, other than, and I'm incredibly lucky in that we basically built a business of a spreadsheet. And the reason why we did that was I was very, very nervous that we'll go and, get a bunch of money and try and build something without being able to get that feedback loop of whether people want to buy what we're selling. So we, in essence, constructed a product in a spreadsheet and went out and tried to sell it. And when we saw that people are indeed buying, off the back of that, we started building scalability into the product. And that in turn helped us raise money, because we were raising a pre-seed round into a business with existing revenues. It did not have the product built, software side, but the product existed. So I think in the new markets, I think that applies to climate, but to make it more broad for everybody that might be listening, in a new market where it isn't exactly clear whose budget you're pitching, and if you're not exactly clear that there is already an established pool of clients that will be killing themselves to get to you, doing some form of testing ahead of time that indeed there's going to be demand, I would say is probably the right way to go. And then understanding that, for instance, the way that you look at your budgets and your spend, it's not only going to be about spending it on pitching a potential existing client base, there's also going to be spent on educating the clients that there should be a need for what you're building.
Super interesting. And Jon, from a VC perspective then, does the criteria that you're kind of looking at when startups come to you and they say, we've got product market fit, or we're looking for product market fit, does that change when are you kind of considering the sectors when you kind of respond to that?
Like, first thing, I just want to relate to something both Marta and Georgie said. I think that's okay. You got in the way the technical definition of product market fit, but then I think you're adding some kind of X factorness, or maybe not magic, but this extra purpose of creating something that is not just 1x or 2x, but 10x better than what's existing. To have that ambition, I think if you're also able to define something of a grander purpose within your ambitions of product market fit, I think that will be noticeable when you're meeting investors. I think that will be noticeable when you're building a culture in the company, before I turned VC, I co-founded an online grocery company, and to be out there on the day before Christmas Eve and getting a hug from your customers, just that you just saved the Christmas for us. I think to able to manifest these things as a part of the culture, and also in the ambitions going towards product market fit, I think that's important. And then, I mean, the concept of product market fit, you can say it's pretty much the same from sector to sector, but I think where it differs is which KPIs is important for you. You need to understand what different KPIs will signal product market fit in, like what you described, Marta, is more like a deep tech, longer distance run in order to be able to deliver the values. And I think, yeah, so, and that's where it differs to really understand what does it take to succeed with a software as a service, what does it succeed with e-commerce and business to consumer stuff. I think that's where it's different. I think for us as a VC, it's important to see that you're able to also pin that down into concrete KPIs related to the journey you're on. So in a way, the concept of product market fit is pretty much the same, I think, across sectors, but how you live it out and the KPIs you measure, and also the activities will differ quite a lot, I think.
Super helpful, thank you. So obviously we're currently in what is quite a tough economic climate for startups, to put it gently. So how has what is required for product market fit changed given the current market? Kind of how has the criteria for that changed? Georgie, I'll head to you first.
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, the market, the funding market has changed fundamentally. And I think we were talking just before, and I remember when it changed, like it literally happened within a 5-day period. And from Wednesday, when venture was telling everyone, grow, we'll worry about it later, like freemium, everyone's just like, just get as many customers as you can, to the Monday when they were like, you need to be profitable in the next quarter. And I think that I called my dad, and because it was quite stressful, you know, lots of people were in companies that were funded, you know, their runway was close and wasn't something that they had even thought about, because you had great investors and they believed in you. So it was always there, but it wasn't a worry. And so I was talking to my dad, and I said, you know, and I was saying, you know, well, we need to worry about this, and we need to worry about this. And he summed it up, and he was just like, so you mean like you need to make money like a regular business? and I think that for me was a bit of an eye-opener. Nothing like your parents to keep you honest, right? I think we've been living in a bubble for the last decade of, you know, growth and funding, and, you know, we create it's all about desirability, and product management as a function has completely matured in this phase, right, as well. So a lot of product managers and product leaders are all about desirability. And not many product managers could explain a P&L to you or understand the P&L of their product. And I think from Wednesday to Monday, that was a requirement. And so when you're thinking about product market fit, it has to be actually, more importantly, a viable thing these days. And I think when you're starting, and I do a lot of advising to early stage startups, and there's always a couple of things that I recommend. The first is that you should have 2 revenue streams. You might not be using 2 of them, but you should have 2. So for instance, when I joined Tier, which was before the funding, the change, one of the reasons I liked them was because they had the best platform from a micro-mobility infrastructure perspective. And from my point of view, that is something that they could have white labeled. It was leading. There was a lot of micro-mobility companies, but Tier was one of the only ones that actually built all their own infrastructure, ran their own logistics, did their own warehousing. And coming from fintech, I know that and being part of that fintech boom, there's a lot of companies that built on other people's rails. And that was a real risk as far as I was concerned. N26 is one of the few neobanks that built their own banking system. And so the first one was 2 revenue streams. So what are they and how could you sell them both? And the other one was be able to bootstrap. So whether you bootstrap or you go for funding, that's a decision that you need to make as an organization, but you should be able to bootstrap. And I think that's important to show product market fit, because if you can bootstrap, then you have, even if it's just really early stages of something that people would be interested in paying for.
Interesting. And Jon, how have you seen that change from an investor perspective then?
No, I think as Georgie said, it changed literally. I think if you take before Christmas 2021 and the first week of January 2022, that's how fast it changed. And I think it's also a realistic term that you just have to take into consideration. It's the cost of capital has gone up, and I think a lot of companies has been asked, what did we do wrong in the top of the bubble? I think given the situation most companies were in, they probably would have done the same thing as they did. I think the only thing that the companies that had a rough time 2022 and 2023 should have done differently was to acknowledge that they were on the top of a bubble. So you should have a bit more safety space in order to navigate, not so roughly. But in a way, to phrase one of the partners in Sequoia, we're investing in dreams. And I think when capital is cheap and it's not abundant, but it's more capital available, you take bigger risks and you can spend more money on de-risking different stuff. I think today we're in a different climate, which needs that you're not willing to take that much risk, which also means that you need to de-risk faster. And I think that's I think coming from where we was, too many companies were able to get funding, and they weren't eager enough to prove something quick enough, which has also put them in a hard situation today. But then again, in that climate, the capital climate we have now, you should also be prepared to de-risk and to, in a way, de-risk from the investors faster if you want to have them on board. And I think that's reality. You have to take seriously pretty fast. But maybe it's an annoying cliche to hear from an investor. But I think building companies today, it's a much better climate and environment to actually start and build a company today rather than a couple of years ago, because it's much more. You have to. The terms are much more realistic, and I think if you don't have that eagerness and impatience to really to keep momentum and have a high pace on de-risking thing, validate hypothesis, reach the product market fit, I think then the climate today makes it force you to be even more consistent on reaching those milestones. And I think in turns that builds a much more robust company. It builds a more robust company, a culture, and I think it builds a stronger foundation to build great companies also over time. So even it's harder, but I think if you succeed, you're in a much better place than if you would succeed a couple of years ago.
Interesting. And Marta, Curate is obviously quite early stage, so kind of how have you found it, given that you were founded in 2022 and obviously right now is quite a stressful time for all? So kind of what's your experience been as a founder there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to entirely echo everything that's already been said. I think the guys laid it out perfectly. I think for me the main difference it's related to cost and availability of capital and what this buys you or not. So I suppose then the biggest difference is, I can imagine if we'd started a couple years earlier, perhaps my investors would be telling me dump your prices by 10 or 20%, undercut the competition, capital is cheap, get some traction that way and worry about it later. In this climate, my investors are saying, if you must reduce your margin by 50%, but you have to at all points be able to prove that this is something that people are willing to pay for and that you can make money off it. And that is just, and that is, I think, that the fundamental difference. You just have to be this much more focused. And I suppose this smarter. It's relatively easy to offer services, or to sell services that people need if you undercut everybody else on price. We've seen this done over and over and over again. Half of Silicon Valley is built that way. So if you can't just win on price, then you need to win on product. And you have to put all of that effort into figuring out what that looks like and how to outsmart competition, or how to do distribution and reach your clients in a different way. And I think that in terms of a rigor that it instills in the company, I actually think is really helpful. And to echo what Jon said, if you manage to win in this environment, I think you're building a more viable, valuable, long-term business.
Interesting. I'm just going to jump to a question from the audience here because it feels quite relevant. So Jordan's asked, what if you have a product which users love and would be really sad to lose, but you're struggling to sell it? Do you have product market fit? So I think the question here is what are the priorities when it comes to product market fit? So it's not just about filling a user's need, but also the ability to sell it. Does the money making come first? Does the fact that people love your product come first? Jon, what do you think on that?
I think it's in a bit back to, it's easy to say that we were in a bubble and everything was everyone was doing crazy stuff, but I think it was Vinod Koslav said it, like, in that time with that frames, when you have the capital available, you should spend a lot of money on de-risking different stuff. And I think in concept of the question, I think it's always nice to get paid by customers, because it's in a way one of the foundations of building a business and the reason you're building a business. But then again, it's when do you, based on the run rate you have, based on how much time you have, based on what kind of factors do you really need to de-risk? Is the payment the largest factor, or is it other things? That's in a way you need to see that in a bigger frame. But then again, like, we see that some of our best performing companies in our portfolio was the companies that really dared to take a price from the very, very beginning. It's maybe a harder job, but eventually when you first solve it, you know that, oh, we actually were able to build a product that people want to pay for. And I think it's just a story from, we're based in Oslo in Norway, and during the a couple of years ago, there was this company that they just delivered fresh bread and juice without the delivery cost on everyone's doorstep each morning. It was a fantastic product. Everyone loved it, and they suddenly start to understand that we need to increase our unit economics and charge. And they ask their customers, would you pay for delivery fee in order to get the bread and juice there? And of course, when asking the customers said no, and they didn't dare to raise the price. And suddenly it ended up with them being bankrupt. But I remember taking the metro from where I live and into the city that day, where they announced that they were bankrupt. I mean, it felt like it was land sorrow, and everyone on the tram was almost crying because, okay, where's my bread, where's my juice? So in terms of creating a product people love, they should be able to pay for it. And I think that's also a bit of fallacy, especially when you're in a way measured on growth and you're afraid to, in a way, decline the growth. You also start to take along customers that you really shouldn't take along. So also to early on dare to say no to a lot of customers. I know it's really hard to do, but it's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? On that, what you said, Jon. One of the things before joining N26, right, I was very into the freemium model. kind of almost fearful of high prices, right? But one of the things I learned at N26 was that it's a lot easier to reduce your price than it is to increase your price. So start high. That was just, so that's my advice, because you can always bring it down. But I think on the, is it more important to charge the money, or is it more important to think about it from a desirability perspective? I mean, building products has a lot of similarities with real life, right? So it's a bit like, if you don't charge, right, but everyone loves your product, it's a bit like having a relationship that hasn't gone through any tough times, right? Like, it's really easy to be besottedly in love with each other when everything is going really well. And then if something happens, if the relationship falls apart, then was it really love to start with? And I think that this is a question that you should ask yourself about your product, because if someone loves, when you think about desirability, don't think about it as desirability is here and paying for the product is over here. If someone desires your product in a way that makes it a viable product, then they will pay for it. So it's like having you're only truly in love with someone if you've made it through tough times together, because then you know that that love is strong. So make the tough time the payment, right? And to Jon's point about the delivery fee, like, also don't always listen to customers, right? Like, they don't always know what they will do. Obviously, if you put something in front of them that looks great and they say, yeah, I'd absolutely use that product, and then you realize that actually they don't use it at all, because they don't really yet know. And one of the things, that's our job as founders and product people, is to work out what the consumer needs that they don't know they need yet. So really think about the problem space and the psychology behind them. That's why I love consumer products so much, right? Because you can really like actually talk about like human psychology, whereas in B2B you have to really think about the network that is a business and the kind of company psychology around that and payment and things like that. But in consumer, you can literally walk down to the coffee shop and say, figure this out, like just figure it out. Does it make sense? Do you know? And just watch if they can click the button or something. But don't be scared to charge. I think that's something that we've almost been taught to be fearful of asking people to pay, because we've had Ubers and everything that have been free. There's a whole generation of people that grew up in San Francisco that don't think they should pay for anything, because everything has been free from, not free for venture capital, but free from a consumer perspective. So don't be scared of the price. The price is important, and that will really tell you if you have something that has product market fit or not.
And if I can just quickly add to that, I think, Georgie, part of what you're talking about is also just introducing friction. There was this fantastic example. I believe it was Skyscanner, who years ago, started indexing flights, and they would immediately just show you all the flights that were possible. Or maybe it was Expedia, I can't remember now. And the first reaction was that consumers were finding it quite difficult to be like, okay, but like, is it really giving me a good deal? And then they introduced the loader, and it said, loading the best prices for you, and it takes 10 seconds. And it made a huge difference in the way that consumers perceived that they were actually getting a really good deal. And that in principle goes against everything that we've learned about how fast websites should load. And if your homepage doesn't load within a 0.1 of a second, then people are going to drop off and think it's not particularly good. So I think in the same way, in relation to price, and I could not agree more, I think absolutely we have to have the confidence to charge, and also to charge fairly and to be transparent what we're charging. We're not advocating here as just 10x the price of something and hope for the best. But there is also, going back to human psychology, there is a perception, and it's interlinked in people's head, the relationship between value and price. If you're giving stuff away for free, now, is that really as valuable? Because, why would it be free otherwise? Ask anybody, is a £1,000 watch better than a £200 watch? And probably people will assume that the former was better. So how can you use price as something that will that will not only build you a better business, but also influence the perception of the quality of products that you're offering.
And the other part about that is that you need to tell customers what the value is. So don't think that you can build something and you know that it's super valuable and it solves a problem and all. Don't think that they'll just figure it out and work out what the value is. You need to, that's where the product marketing aspect is crucial, especially when you're a startup, and especially if you're like Marta is, creating the market while winning the market. Like, you really need to be telling people what they're getting from this. And I think that's what you were referencing when you were talking about education, right? And really showing, like, this is what you're doing. This is the problem, just in case you didn't know. And this is the solution to this. I mean, even down to things like, we have awesome new features on Moonpig. And there's been great things. There's stickers, there's AI text writing if you don't know what to say, and a sympathy card. I wrote a poem for my Christmas card. Like, there's really cool stuff, right? But people aren't just going to figure out that it's there. We need to surface it to them. We need to show them what they can use it for. Like, AI text writer sounds great, but like, yeah, what would I do with that? Like, yeah, okay, I get the sympathy one, but I don't really send sympathy cards. So, it's cool, but I won't use it. If they don't use it, it doesn't count, right? Like, that's the other thing. If they don't use it and they don't pay for it, don't build it.
Just two reflections on the discussion now. Like, the one thing I think, like, product market fit as a concept, at least where I start to see it all the way around, is a part of like the lean startup philosophy of continuously improvement combined with validating hypothesis. I think that's also, like, to understand that I think when you embark on a journey to create a company, it never ends. And how can you instill these continuously improvement cycles to continue to learn, continue to ask, continue to validate hypotheses? I think that's product market fit is in a way only one of the milestones along that long journey of a lot of experiments. And the other thing, I think it's like living in the age of almost abundant information, and now soon abundant intelligence as well, is like, to build a successful company is really, really hard. So in a way, you're aiming to become the best in the world at something, or at least the best in Europe, or the best within the range. And what I really also encourage is like the information out there, the blueprints, the know-how, the smart tips and tricks, it's out there. So I think also just encourage people to dare to believe that we're going to be world championships in this, and the answer and the blueprint and the inspiration on how to do like the perfect marketing, the perfect copy. We're just living in such an amazing time, so the information is out there, and go out and seek the world-class information and knowledge, because it exists, and combine that also with, I think it's back to the purpose and like the 10x type of mindset that just a reflection when listening to Marta and Georgie.
Great. Well, thank you for that question. I feel that was a really fruitful discussion off the back of that. It's super interesting. So I think it'd be interesting as well to kind of talk about what happens if things don't go to plan. And we kind of touched on this a little bit, I think, through the discussion, but ultimately, what happens if you don't find product market fit, but you've already expended time and effort and money into the process? Kind of, is there a point where founders should think about pivoting? And if so, kind of, how do you communicate that with your investors? So what sort of advice would you give to founders who find themselves in that position?
I think it's hard to give like one answer on that question, because I mean, you have a lot of cases of that's funny when you hear the success of a company, you hear about the hockey stick, and when they reach product market fit and everything's a success, but very often it's a 5 to 10 year process, or it's a long process before that, and it's and then again, I think sometimes it just takes time, and I mean, you have companies that has almost been been out, and then suddenly they found this magic moment. For me, at least when we're looking at companies, this is a typical thing. Like when you're in dialogue with a startup in terms of doing an investment, we always ask, okay, what happened? What has happened since last we met? Even if that's 3 days or 1 week or like a month or a half year, but then you will, I think, an important sign for us is to look for, has it happened a lot? Is the founders impatient? Are they having a high pace and speed? I think and sometimes you see companies where the impatient isn't there. They're spending a lot of time, just spending a lot of time without getting that traction, and then sometimes you feel, okay, now you might quit. But then on the other side, you see teams that iterate really, really fast, and you just see, okay, they've spent a lot of time, but they've done a lot of learning. I think one of the portfolio companies that we use as a benchmark, they've done 5 startups before this one, and the 5 startups didn't really go well. But you just see the pace and the tempo they have is that if they would spend a lot of time, I would be sure that they spend that time wisely. And if you have that high pace and impatience in your organization, I think you should have also the patience to wait for the right moment. But when we see that, okay, nothing has happened the last 3 weeks since last time we talked to the company, then I think that's a bad sign. And so it's more about, I think, iteration and tempo speed in the company, more than a perfect right timing on when to pivot or when to fold or when. But I think success happens never when you expect it, as Marta said. You try to think and do all the smart things, and now it's going to happen, and nothing happens, and then suddenly all out of the blue things explode. So I think that's also something you should be prepared of.
And Georgie, as someone who is, oh, sorry, no, go ahead, Martha. Sorry.
Ditto. All good. Happy to wait my turn.
No, please go ahead.
I think what's also really interesting is to think, sort of, the art of the pivot. Is it a pivot completely from what you were, away from what you were doing? Or most often, it might be that the product execution you're working on is wrong, but the underlying data behind it could be used and turned into something else that would create value, or that the people you're addressing it at. So for Figma, the biggest acquisition in history, started as a tool for a different customer segment. And it was a very similar tool before it targeted at a completely different group. And the founder was struggling and failing. I really recommend checking out that story. And then basically out of desperation, started targeting a completely different group, and it took off. So it might be that, the market you're pitching is wrong, or indeed might be that the product is not exactly in demand as much as you wanted it to be. And I think there's a cool story that I like from one of the founders I worked with at Google for Startups. So Compare Ethics are or used to be a platform that would allow you to shop from brands that were very sustainable. So they had their own proprietary algorithm that looked at different criteria that made predominantly fashion brands sort of properly scrutinized as to whether their products were sustainable, and it worked, and it did well. They raised some money, but then increasingly what became clear is that fashion as a massively polluting industry has a huge issue in proving their sustainability credentials, and that they have a big issue with claims and with incoming regulation. They actually pivoted away from a B2C product using the exact same data set to providing basically a compliance product for the fashion industry, which is a bigger opportunity, had a bigger market pool, higher basket value, more revenues for the business. So, in a sense, it's a pivot because it's a different product. The company looks very different today, but also it used the exact same data set that was their own. So I think it's, when we think about how to be smart with what we're building and what it could translate into if the core product that we're selling doesn't seem to be growing or doesn't seem to be in demand as much as we thought. So I think there are many creative ways in which to do that.
Great. Georgie, as an advisor to startups, have you got any insight into this?
I think one of the realities is that being a founder is a lot of art, right? In product, we have a lot of conversations about, is product management art or science? And I think it's a bit of both. But as a founder, yes, there is some science behind, like being data driven and knowing your vertical in your industry and all those kinds of things. But one of the things that's really interesting in my career, I've worked with a lot of founders, but at their scale up phase. And the things that make them great founders are sometimes the things that make them difficult CEOs during scale up phase, right? Because they are decisive and they're clear and they have tunnel vision and they are driven like no one's business, right? Which you get to 3,000 people and that can have some flow-on impacts that you need to deal with. But I think as a founder, there is an art in the pivot. And I think that, to Jon's point on the founders that have, are sixth time founders, and yes, they haven't had a massive success, but actually there's a lot of trust in understanding that they are taking all the right things into consideration. One of the companies that I am an investor in, which is called Pile Capital, that we were building, I invested in a crypto platform, right? And a yield account on crypto rails. And it was very much about, building crypto about 3 months before crypto kind of exploded. and it became kind of a persona non gratis in Europe, especially. And Jess Holbach, she's a second time founder. So she was co-founder of Penta, which is a neobank, a business bank in Germany. She pivoted in a week. She was like, she didn't change the product. She didn't do anything. She just pivoted. Silicon Valley Bank closed. Everyone was freaking out. Founders were freaking out about where to put their money. Actually, thinking about it, I'm probably doing a sales pitch at the same time. But but she was like, okay, I can give you control over where your funding is, right? So we pivoted straight into a founder-driven, clear finances. It's a yield account. It's still on crypto, like it's still structured the same way. We still have the same technical architecture. And all of a sudden it was like sweet spot, because she moved fast enough to take advantage of an opportunity. And I think those things are key. And whether that's because she's seen things before and was confident in her decision-making power. I think that's one thing about founders, like you need to trust your gut. So know kind of why you're doing something, and then do it, right? Like one of the challenges with more mature companies is that you question everything. Oh, I've got product market fit. Do I want to change that? What if I go this way? What if I go that way? Yeah, that doesn't happen at startup stage because you don't have enough money to do that, right? You need to decide where you're going and put all your eggs in the basket and go. If you're going to change, but then move all your eggs and go into that way.
Great, thanks for that. So I think just to wrap up, I think it'd be interesting to talk about scaling. So there was a question in the box that I think, Georgie, you did a little answer to. So obviously product market fit is usually quite an early step in a startup's journey. So I think my question for you is, should a company rest on the original product market fit testing that they've done, or is it something that needs to evolve as the company evolves? And if so, kind of how often should you be revisiting that? How often should you be refining kind of what your product market fit is? So Georgia, you mentioned in the chat that you should build a culture of experimentation so that you are being clear that you expect small iterations. So I wondered if you could just expand a little bit what you mean by that.
Yeah, so I'm always conscious of using like NAF terms, like a culture of experimentation, right? But there's a reason for these things. If you have product market fit and you're scaling and you're growing, right, that is going to change. So for instance, N26 is a really good example, because when I joined at 800,000 customers and kind of wow, like we got like it's just growing massively. And when I left, it was 6.5 million. Now, between 800,000 and 6.5 million, you hit a limit on early adopters. And early adopters are a very specific type of consumer that is completely okay with some rough customer journeys and a couple of, errors and, some downtime, which from a bank, that's a pretty lovely thing to have from a customer. But to grow further and as you scale, you're going to have to adjust, because product market fit for an early adopter is not a product market fit for mass market. And so the problem with not having a culture of experimentation is that you need to have full strategy changes to adjust to that. And you almost need to pivot, right, to the new product market fit. Whereas if you can actually embed a way of working, which is quick learnings, and most of those are going to be quick learnings that we shouldn't have done that, right? So it seems easy on surface, but like to fail that many times is actually something that you need to learn how to do, and needs to be acceptable to founders and to CEOs as well. But then the things that do work will work so much better than everything else. And you're constantly iterating on your product market fit. Now, you can't just decide that that's what you're going to do, and then in 3 weeks' time, you're going to have the product market fit's going to work. It needs to be embedded in how you're working. But honestly, that's the only way that I've seen to maintain product market fit as you're growing, because you're constantly edging towards it, as opposed to kind of going, we've got product market fit, now we've got product market fit, now we've got product market fit. And I think in this day and age, you can't afford for that, because the case may be that you run out of funding and you're here and you're like, oh my God, we need a step change, we need the investment to do the step change. Whereas if you're constantly experimenting and iterating, you've always got something to talk about as to how you're getting that new target market into your product.
Interesting. Marta, what are your thoughts? And are you planning to do that with Curate as you kind of progress with that?
No, great question. I mean, I think first of all, I love what Georgie's saying. So definitely +1 to that. I think I'd sort of separate two things slightly, because I'm really trying to. So there's now 13 of us full-time and another 5 part-time. Obviously, that sort of, again, culture of experimentation, however wanky that sounds, that also evolves based on the size of the team. I try and think about what the suite of products should be for us to fulfill our mission. The goal for the company is to grow the carbon removal space. Our first product is a portfolio of carbon removals, and we have a reasonably good point of view on what that product, what need that solves, and who we're selling it to. We've refined the price point a little bit. We've refined what goes into the portfolio, but we sort of have a strong hypothesis that this is a product that is needed, and just the sort of the certain qualities of the product we're tweaking, and that's an ongoing process. I'm spending most of my time thinking about what is the next product that's related to that same mission. We're hearing from suppliers they're having troubles accessing finance. And that's quite a different product in its nature to, whilst it's still serving the same need, it's a different customer. We're not selling to buyers of carbon removal. We're basically selling capital, providing capital suppliers. So I suppose I have quite a complex ecosystem business. And what I'm trying to do is have a clear owner of the product, including the definition of product market fit and monitoring it, of my brokerage business. And I'm trying to lead on with my financial products director, lead on the strategy for the new products. I suppose they say that the CEO should be working on what's to come in 6 months and thinking about what should be coming in 12 months. So I guess I wonder how that lands with Jon, for instance, who obviously invests in companies all the time. But I think as most of us are trying to deliver our core business and innovate at the same time, I think for me, the key is to not lose sight of the thing that's bringing core business, but also spending enough time about trying to anticipate the need and anticipate the next product and hopefully get there first in relation to the rest of the market.
And Jon, what are your thoughts from the investor perspective?
No, I think it's the concept of product market fit is moving. It's based on what kind of customer groups are you reaching, and as Georgie said, what's the early adopters and the early majority and the late majority. I think it's different things that makes the difference for different target groups. So you need to, I think, continuously evolve what product market fits, or how do you succeed with product market fit going toward different markets and different customers, and then it in a way differentiate what's the future of your company. I mean, you got some of these niche companies just that the market is so big within that niche, so if you're just are able to be a market leader solving that one problem, you're in a way home safe. So I think then it's more about how do you relate to the concept of product market fit towards different customers going along. But I think it's interesting to have a portfolio with companies now reaching Series B, Series C, and also still at pre-seed, because like one thing is the problem you solve today, as Marta, what are 6 months, 12 months, but in a long-term perspective, you should also try to find, I think you mentioned it, Georgie, several revenue streams, several business models. So I think this continues to also have the culture and the ability to continuously build new business model, build new products based on the base of your company is really important. I think we also see some in a way startups that or scale-ups that are really good at that in the start, but somehow you lose some of that agility and playfulness and innovative effort to really continue to just evolve and create more innovation going down the line. I think if you really want to really succeed big, then you also have to be able to innovate on business models. And if you're going to innovate on business models and at the same time growing your company, reaching new customers, the aspect of product market fit is a continuous element that it never disappears.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much to my panelists for joining me today and sharing those really, really interesting insights and experience on this topic. So yeah, hopefully some people in the audience today will have taken away some learnings on how to kind of nail that all important product market fit process. And as we just talked about, the importance of keeping that process in mind throughout the growth of the company, not just in the early days. So that's all we've got time for today. So thank you, everyone. Apologies if we didn't get around to your question, but Georgie's been really great at answering them in text as well. So thank you for that, Georgie. So hopefully I will see more of the audience for our next Sifted Talks, which is on how to succeed across the pond, taking place next Wednesday. You can go to sifted.eu/talks to find out more. So that's everything from us. Thank you again to all my panelists for your time today, and thank you to our audience for joining us this Wednesday afternoon.